A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends, welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And A Course in What is a free weekly podcast that comes out every Tuesday. And this is podcast episode number 38. So I wanted to share an email that I received today. And one of the reasons I started this podcast was to not only share my understanding of the course with you, but to connect with other students of the course, even if only on the level of the mind through this podcast. I don't belong to a course community. I used to go to Kenneth Wapnick's workshops, but rarely, maybe once a year, sometimes not for 3 or 4 years. But I never really felt a communion with the other students there. I used to just go and sit in the back and listen to the brilliance that is Kenneth Wapnick. And I used to have a course group. I led a weekly Course in Miracles study group back in the late 90s. And that's really the last time that I ever really connected with fellow course students. So when I receive an email from you, or when you comment on Facebook or just like our Facebook page, I feel really good about that. I feel connected to you. I feel like somebody else is on this journey with me, and that means so much to me. So thank you for listening and continuing this journey with me. We've only really just begun. And so I'll just share this really interesting email about this woman's journey with A Course in Miracles and where she's at with her study and practice of it. Hi, Cynthia. I am so grateful I stumbled upon your extensions. I have been studying the course since 1986. Wow, how time flies when you think you are in it. Anyway, I love the text. I always have. The experience for me is like having crossed a desert land for what feels like an eternity, to be given the Holy Grail, one drop of golden water at a time. I am thrilled to be able to sit back and listen to it via your voice. It allows my mind to relax into it from a less analytical point of reference, in parentheses, my buddy, the ego, while I do my yoga or lay with my dog. How awesome is that? Perfection. I have noted over the years that even when I was seemingly not doing the course, as I would physically lay the material down for months on end, that is when the experience shifted and the course was doing me. Quite profound, really. 3 years ago, I experienced a hurricane where I lost all of my worldly possessions except for my dog. What a miscreation that was. Well, maybe not, as during the 2 years of traveling and camping all over the United States, experiencing a myriad of projections from the ego mind, while I decided to get real serious about application of the course. I referred to my travels of my A Course in Miracles adventures as the cosmic coffee benches, as I sat at the local brews of every town I encountered to meet my fellow brethren. A year ago, I settled in the Appalachian Mountains to dive into the course even deeper. I am currently 2 years into it, and it is amazing. For the next 5 months, I will be completely isolated by choice with my canine. Other than my mail person and grocery shopping, I have chosen to see no one out there. I have discovered that when the projections are limited externally, it allows for a deeper, transformative clean out of the contents of my mind. I will complete this sojourn in May and then drive across country again and settle in Southern Oregon. I have even noticed that while I read through the text these days, spontaneous miracles of healing within my mind occur with little to no effort on my part. I will have an experience of thought and correction occur simultaneously during a paragraph, and then go back to that paragraph in absolute wonder to see what could have triggered it, and can find the association nowhere. I share this with all of my heart and soul to anyone studying this course, as it is a profound, wordless experience of monumental healing once you get out of the way. So, my advice is to stick with it. If it gets too heady, step away and allow it to penetrate. The little willingness required is a vast understatement. That is all that is required of you. Even if you whisper the mantra, I want to go home, it will take you in the correct direction. All you have to do is trust the process. So little is asked and so much is gained. I am currently listening to number 13 of your podcast and intend to catch up to your weekly releases, as I have found the universality of experience of the course has remarkable sonship effects when participated in numbers, even though no one is really out there. Teehee. That is my extension to all for today. I am off to listen to podcast number 13. Thank you. So that is a very interesting email, and I find it fascinating what she is going through and this idea of not interacting with people in terms of seeing them physically, except the people she bumps into, of course, grocery shopping and her mail person and her dog, of course. And that is clearly how the Holy Spirit is guiding her in terms of healing her mind. Again, everybody's path is different. The Course says that there is a unique atonement plan for you, an individual plan. And for some people like her, it's amazing. You end up losing everything and then traveling around and having this profound life-changing experience of studying the Course and kind of isolating yourself. But again, that's not everybody's experience, of course. That's not asked of us. For most of us, it's just the daily application and the people we run into, our jobs that we go to, where the Holy Spirit asks us to look at those things differently. And it also reminds me of this idea of going to like an ashram or a silent retreat. I haven't done those things, but I've always been fascinated by them. And I've always felt intuitively that if I did that, I would have a profound experience. But I haven't been guided to do that, so I haven't yet. Anyway, I thought that you would enjoy hearing her experience with A Course in Miracles right now. And I thank you so much to this listener for sending this in. All right, so let's continue on with our reading. We are on chapter 3, The Innocent Perception, section 5, Beyond Perception, and page 44. And we are on paragraph 3. So you may recall that this section began by distinguishing between make and create, and he's going to expand on these two different levels in the next few paragraphs. Paragraph 3, sentence 1. Knowing, as we have already observed, does not lead to doing. So knowing and doing are opposites, like the words create and make. And again, if you're unfamiliar with these terms, we've been talking about this in the last few podcast episodes, so I don't want to waste other listeners' time by going over this ad nauseum. So if you don't understand the difference between those two words as a student of A Course in Miracles, after this podcast episode, just go ahead and go listen to the one before this. And actually, I've been talking about it in the last few podcast episodes, and the idea of knowledge and perception and duality and non-dualism. So knowing and doing are opposites, like create and make. So knowing is of God and doing is of perception, or the level of duality within the dream. Heaven doesn't lead to perception. Oneness doesn't lead to separation. Even though the Course metaphysically, in that ontological moment of having the tiny mad idea where oneness appeared to separate, it can't separate, as the Course tells us. It can only have a dream of separation, but in reality, oneness doesn't lead to separation. We can believe that we've separated, but we can't know that we are separate. And this reminds me of the philosopher Descartes, who said that we cannot be sure of anything We can only know that we are having an experience of some sort. So he likened our experience in the world to a dream at night. And that's, I'm sure, very familiar to you, that metaphor or analogy. It's there's a little bit of Descartes in A Course in Miracles. It feels very real, this experience, but of course it's all just occurring in our mind. It's made up. 2, the confusion between your real creation and what you have made of yourself is so profound that it has become literally impossible for you to know anything. So the confusion of who you are and who you think you are is profound. Who we think we are, who we are told, is that we're a body in a physical world. But the Course is reminding us that we are a mind, or you can think of it as a spirit outside of time and space, dreaming this dream of separation. From the state of within the dream, it's impossible for us to know anything, as he says. We are immersed in ego. So we need a teacher from outside of the dream to guide us out of the dream or awaken us from the dream. And of course, that would be the Holy Spirit. 3, knowledge is always stable, and it is quite evident that you are not. I think this is a funny statement. He's basically saying that we're not stable. It's quite evident that you are not stable. Oneness is stable because the only thing that causes instability is separation. It's believing that we are no longer one. And we can see this in our own lives when we feel unstable. It's that we're buying into some illusion. And we can see this in people who we label as unstable. That person's really unstable. We think of them as really buying into the illusion. They're sort of so far gone from their right mind that they are off balance. But on some level, we're all like that. 4, nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. Despite what we believe and what we are experiencing, he's saying there's a part of you, the part of you connected to God, that is perfectly stable. I often call that the higher self to my clients, and also in my writing sometimes, but the Course, of course, would call it the Holy Spirit. And higher self is just a less loaded word for a lot of people. So, nevertheless, as sentence 4 says, you are perfectly stable as God created you. 5, in this sense, when your behavior is unstable, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. That's brilliant. So when we are doing something that's incongruous with who we are or who we want to be, he's saying that we are disagreeing with God's idea of who we are. And how do we disagree? Only the ego can disagree with God. So we've made a choice in those moments to side with the ego. And so when our behavior is unstable, we have made a choice to side with our ego instead of the Holy Spirit. So we allow the ego to teach us, to interpret things, to rule our mind. And that's why when you find yourself doing something that isn't congruent with your higher self, you simply acknowledge that and resign as your own teacher, as the Course says, because you have been badly taught. Ask the Holy Spirit to heal you of the belief that leads to that maladaptive behavior in your life. 6, you can do this if you choose, but you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind. Meaning you can disagree with God's idea of who you are if you choose. That's your right. You have free will. You can disagree. We do it all the time, most of the time. He's saying, there's a better way. You wouldn't really choose this if you knew who you were. You wouldn't really disagree with God if you understood the strength and the power of that choice. Paragraph 4, sentence 1. The fundamental question you continually ask yourself cannot properly be directed to yourself at all. So this only makes sense if we keep reading, actually. Sentence 2, you keep asking what it is you are. So we keep asking, who am I? We've all asked that question, or at least wondered what's our reality at some point. 3, this implies that the answer is not only one you know, but is also one that is up to you to supply. So when we ask that question, who am I? We are actually implying that we know, and it's up to us to know. 4, yet you cannot perceive yourself correctly. So yet within a split mind, within our current perception, we cannot perceive ourselves correctly. The ego will most likely answer that question, and it'll answer it to our liking, but it won't be the truth with a capital T. 5, you have no image to be perceived. So here he's talking about our true state. In our true state of reality in oneness, there is no image, because image is a part of perception. And again, don't get scared by that. That can be a really scary statement, the idea that, like, who am I? Well, you're not even an image. Just understand what he's trying to get you to see, which is that there's something beyond the perception of who you believe that you are. And I think that if we can open our minds to that, then we can begin to transcend the ego more and more. So this is a process, it is a journey. But some of these statements can be really scary to our ego, to our individuality, to who we believe we are. 6, the word image is always perception related and not a part of knowledge. So we address that. There is no separation and oneness. So there can be no image. 7, images are symbolic and stand for something else. So we are the thing behind the image. 8, the idea of changing your image recognizes the power of perception, but also implies that there is nothing stable to know. So we can change our image here in this world in duality, and that's the power of this state of perception. But the second half of that sentence says it also implies that there is nothing stable to know, meaning we get caught up in changing the image, seeing the shadows on the cave as who we are, as Plato said. And shadows are indeed unstable. And if we see that as who we are, that image, we will never know our true self. And of course, there's nothing wrong with changing your image. There's nothing wrong with getting fit and losing 50 pounds. There's nothing wrong with dyeing your hair brown from blonde. It's all of that. It doesn't really matter. He's just saying all of that actually can be really important on your own journey. But he's getting us to see even beyond that, beyond those changing perceptions of who we are. There is something completely stable within us that can't ever be changed. Paragraph 5, sentence 1, knowing is not open to interpretation. So shadows are open to interpretation. Images are open to interpretation. In fact, that's what that Rorschach ink blot test is all about. It's all interpretation. And everybody sees something different. But here Jesus is saying that there can be no interpretation in heaven or oneness. 2, you may try to interpret meaning, but this is always open to error because it refers to the perception of meaning. I feel like he's really trying to drive home this idea that we can't trust our best intentions. We can't really trust our perceptions at this point because they will be wrong. We need to be very clear that we don't understand what we see, that we don't know what we need, but there's one within us who does know. And this goes back to the workbook lessons. In the first lesson, nothing I see means anything. He's wiping those perceptions clear. So I feel like he's saying the same thing here as in those first few Course in Miracles lessons. 3. Such incongruities are the result of attempts to regard yourself as separated and unseparated at the same time. So this refers to the conflict in our mind that we all have a split mind. There are then two voices vying for our attention, the ego and the Holy Spirit. 4. It is impossible to make so fundamental a confusion without increasing your overall confusion still further. I talk about confusion. This is a confusing sentence. I had to read it a couple times. So I think what he's saying that it's like asking the question, what is the ego? Who am I? Same thing. Only an ego can ask the question, what is an ego? It begins with the premise that there is separation and that the ego does exist. So you're stuck when you ask that question. When we say, who am I? It's the same thing. We can't ask that question unless we are pretending not to know. So we're leading to further confusion. But just to be clear, I think it's a good idea to ask this question, who am I? It's better than not asking it. It's better than being steadfast in the belief that all you are is a body and that's it. Asking that question to me is the first step to knowing the answer. But he's taking it one step further and telling us as students of his course that we need to understand the ego dynamics that are at play when we ask that question. But it's okay to ask the question. Just understand what's really occurring. 5. Your mind may have become very ingenious, but as always happens when method and content are separated, it is utilized in a futile attempt to escape from an inescapable impasse. That was a mouthful. Okay, so basically the ego is super ingenious, but it's still an ego. It's still separation. No matter what theories we come up with, no matter what ingenious plans we have, it's still within the realm of separation. So the ego is still analyzing who we are from within the dream. 6. Ingenuity is totally divorced from knowledge because knowledge does not require ingenuity. So ingenuity is of the ego. The ego needs ingenious thinking. It needs to keep us stuck in the dream. It comes up with all kinds of ingenious plans and thought systems and theories. But the Holy Spirit doesn't need to be clever. As the Course says, God is, and then you cease to speak. 7. Ingenious thinking is not the truth that shall set you free, but you are free of the need to engage in it when you are willing to let it go. So we have the choice to let go of this type of thinking. And how do we do that? By choosing another teacher, by not taking that voice of the ego so seriously, by recognizing that there is another way of looking at the situation or this person or this world or my life. And that will set us free of the need to engage in the ego. So ingenious thinking won't really get us anywhere. It's sort of a trap, but being willing to let it all go will get us where we really want to go. Okay, so we'll end there for today. And if you would like to stay in touch, we have a Facebook page just for this podcast at facebook.com/A Course in What. And I also have one for my hypnotherapy page /Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy. And you can contact me at acourseinwhat@gmail.com. And there's also a submission form on my website if that's easier. Okay, so if you would like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.